Welcome to Straightforward.
Well, thank you very much.
I remember our first conversation a few years ago when you had, after becoming commissioner in the second term, and I asked you to mention your top priority when talking about the single market. And you didn't hesitate at all, you said implementation. Why was that?
Well, first maybe on these 30 years of single market, it may not seem so, but I do remember when I turned 30. Experienced, but so not perfect. You know, still a lot of work to do. Yeah. So I don't find it strange that the single market is not, you know, everything we dreamt of, because it must be work in progress. But what is important is that we have the right mechanisms to make sure that it progresses. And this is why I, without hesitation, say implementation. Because when we have problems of the single market, it's because that member states implement a bit differently if it's a directive or if it's a regulation, that there are, you know, just that barrier that sort of comes crawling up again. And the single market, I think, is the single most important thing in creating prosperity. Prosperity that translates into educational systems, health systems, infrastructure, everything that makes our economies work well.
But both you and I have been part of this system for a decade now, or at least a decade. And as long as I remember, at least, we have talked about this problem. Why is it so hard to solve a problem like that?
Well, one of the reasons is that when the Commission goes up against one member state who may have raised the barrier, there is no pressure from others, from those who would benefit from the barrier coming down. And this is why we have created the Single Market Task Force. And that is then member states and the Commission. So if there is an issue with one member state, the rest of the member states say, oh, now you solve that. And the progress there has been quite good. For instance, when it comes to recognizing different sort of professional qualifications, taking down barriers when it comes to permitting, so that you're not sort of second priority if you're not sort of native in that member state. And that, I think, is a really good tool. But of course, the old school infringement tool is still part of the toolbox, because you need the deterrence. That if things are not done well, then the Commission will come and they will threaten to take it to court.
But now, I mean, and forgive me for continuing on this track, but 60% of market barriers which the companies complain about today are the very same barriers that we were looking at 20 years ago. And now you're mentioning the task force, but why wait 20 years to come up with a solution like that, if that's the solution?
Well, I think sometimes, well, first, some things are very resistant. And then probably things are a bit in waves. You know, there is a barrier, then it seizes a bit, and then it comes back again. Because a marketplace is a dynamic place. And the paradox is that just as much as everyone sees the benefits of one market, because 450 million people is much better than 6 million or 40 million or 30 million. But anyway, you know, there is this temptation that just that little bump on the road when someone wants to cross a border. And this is why it keeps maintenance. You know, I remember when we bought a small cottage in Sweden, actually there was a piece of land next to it. 25 years later, it's a forest. And that is the risk you take if you do not do maintenance to the single market, because you need to take out the weeds, the small trees every day, because otherwise, once you look again, you have a forest instead of farmable land. So
it's an ongoing process. It's not one size fits all. It's not one fix and then it's all solved.
No, and also because the digital single market was something that we invented in the last Commission mandate. So that still needs to be deepened, need to be perfected. We don't have a single market for telcos because we have national spectrum management. Which means that it's very difficult for them to be pan-European and to harvest efficiencies. So also when you look at services, it's not that easy to be an architect that wants to provide your services in another country. So we're still adding new dimensions to the single market, things that do not exist today.
I just read a piece in the Financial Times just a few days ago talking about that this commission has actually been lacking when it comes to enforcement. I think it was about 80% that you were going down on infringement procedures. Why is that in a situation where you are so forceful when it comes to debating the implementation or lack of it?
Well, I think there are probably good reasons and bad reasons. Probably the pandemic is part of it, because it was 2 years where, you know, very different priorities. The one priority was to make sure that the most fundamental functionalities of the single market was there, that trucks could pass borders, that we have the green lanes, so the very fundamental functioning of the single market. So no time for infringement processes. Second, preventing things from happening, both more, you know, intensive use of the single market task force, but also I think maybe being less formalistic and saying, listen, you need to stop that, what you're doing. And an intense use of regulations instead of directives. And that, of course, changes the differences that can occur. Yeah. And then there may be, for bad reasons, things that have not been done that I don't know of because I'm not the Single Market Commissioner.
That's a good excuse. Well, anyway, talking about the businesses and their perception of things, I mean, I guess everyone dealing with the single market and legislation would recognize that the EU during this legislature has provided the EU and its businesses with a flood of directives and regulations, especially with the Fit for 55 package. I think I counted 18 different laws. And on the digital agenda, which you mentioned yourself, we have seen a true bonfire. I mean, the DSA, the DMA, the Data Act, the NIS2, Cyber Resilience Act, you name it. Now, just to get an overview and even more to secure some kind of alignment, it's by far the biggest task for companies all around Europe, so they say. How do you look at these worries?
Well, maybe I should also mention just one very specific tool, which is called Solvit. So if there is an issue, you can get in touch with the Commission, and there is a very high ambition to solve things fast. So hands-on. And that kind of tools, of course, can be used intensively and can be scaled if need be. On your question in itself, I consider the legislation here to be market creating. Because the thing, for instance, of the Digital Markets Act, the very idea is to make sure that the market is open and contestable. Because as it is today, many businesses, they depend on a giant with giant market power to get to their customers. And with an open market, well, the investor will know that it's about you and not the gatekeeper, whether you get to your customers or not.
I guess most companies will sign on that because I think they agree that we need some kind of regulation. But they also tell us, whenever we ask them, give us a break. Just give us a break. 6 months, 12 months, just to cope with this flood of do you understand that worry?
I understand it completely, but sometimes, you know, there's also a bigger role to play for business organizations. We had a visit from someone who had made a compliance tool for the Digital Services Act. It's an asymmetrical piece of legislation, so if you're big, you have a big responsibility, you have a lot to do. If you're a small guy, there is a touch, but it's not that big. So they had made sort of a compliance tool for the small guy. And when they were calling people, what they got was, no, probably not for me. Or, yeah, but that's only September, isn't it? So maybe I think it would also be a good thing if business associations, they sort of said, listen, we need an implementation strategy. We need to work with you to implement in a strategic way, so that if we have 1, 2, 3 pieces of legislation that comes into effect more or less at the same time, we can do it in one go. And I think there are different roles here. And I consider this very important that we figure out what procedures, what cooperation can make this happen. Because the problem is that there's no real glamour in implementation and enforcement and in just making things happen in the most efficient way.
What I hear you say is that they have to step up as well. It's not only about just stop complaining and step up the efforts.
Well, I think the complaining is a very good sort of sound to guide you, because then you know that there are pain points, that there is something that hurts. But it must be complemented with, well, what do we do then? Because then there can also be a learning feedback to the legislator, not only to the Commission, but also to the Parliament and to the Council.
I guess also a point would be that 99 or 98% of all companies in Europe are SMEs. So, and I guess that there's also a message to them, I guess, because SMEs to some extent are exempted for a lot of this piece of legislation.
Yeah, and then it comes as the swallow in spring, the promise that now we will deregulate.
Yeah.
Now we will get rid of red tape.
Never going to happen.
But I think there is a slim chance here because of digitization. Because it is actually possible to say once only. You can provide your data once only, and then our systems will fill them in all the different places where they are needed. This is not possible on paper. It's not possible in any other way. But I think that is the real chance. Because the thing is that when you have a data-driven economy, which is where we are heading, well, then also the regulatory side will be data-driven. Yeah. So we will still need the data, but we can make it so much easier to provide those data.
We can get rid of some of the bureaucrats, I hope.
Yeah, because your data in your business, they will be digital in the first place. So you can better interact with your reporting obligations, because the public systems, they will be digital as well.
Looking at the years to come and the likely perspective of maybe 5 to 10 more member states from especially the Balkans and the very eastern countries, how do you foresee the single market coping with this? Because this is, of course, states which might not have the same administrations, might be a little more corrupt, and then we have even more problems when it comes to implementation, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's really important not to picture an enlargement with the state of the candidate countries as they are right now. One should imagine that we have enlargement once you can live up to the obligations that you have as being part of the single market. If you look at Ukraine, which is probably more digitalized than any other European country, the Estonians just implemented part of the Ukrainian wallet, and Estonia is the most digitalized European country. They are using digitization to weed out corruption, because they put in digital systems everywhere where there would otherwise be an outstretched hand asking for something. So I think that we can see that change coming, because the ambition to become a member is the ambition to become a member of a place where there's no corruption, where there's opportunity, where there's innovation, where there's rule of law. And we shouldn't undermine those wishes by saying, probably you'll still be a bit corrupt. No, we should have the expectation that we're all weeding out corruption, because that is a fundamental evil in any market.
So some of us have been positively surprised about Ukraine and the speed they have on the process. So what you're telling me is actually that Ukraine could be a matrix, could be a kind of model for member states to come?
I definitely think so, because the flag on the tallest pole in the Maidan place was the European flag. The war that they're in, what they fight for, is European values. They want to reconstruct Ukraine into becoming a member of the European Union, and they know exactly what it takes, because this is what they want: a country that is not corrupt, a country that is prospering.
On that happy note, positive note, I think we should stop here. Thank you very much for participating.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.